Hello and welcome back.
Welcome to Telling the Show, Season 2, Episode 2.
That's right.
So thank you guys
Um,
for following along with us on Season 1 and all our twists and turns, like any good screenplay. And
Absolutely.
and we're a different kind of podcast. Denise, would you mind telling them why?
Because we are also writers and not like, you're not going to find me in a boardroom, not anytime soon, but we're struggling and we're going to learn together. And that's what it's all about is learning. Never stop learning.
Amen. Amen. And the idea is that there's all kinds of things we can learn from each other, and we're all graduates of of master's degree programs. And while that it may not mean much to literally any Hollywood executive, we know what it means to us, and we know what kind of investment that writing a screenplay is. And so, because we're struggling, we don't have we may not have the same benefits as others like Craig Mazin or John August and their esteemed podcast, but we'd like to think we do a lot in our own special way, don't we, Denise?
We do. We do. I think we've increased our viewership or listenership, however you want to say it, by like 50%. So I think we're doing great. So I can't wait. It's going to be a great year.
I'd agree. And our episode this time, we're talking about writer as filmmaker, because a lot of the folks that we've had in the past, we've had some folks that are about to go into production, investing in themselves, not just as writers, but somebody who can execute on what they've written. So in that case, I think I'm going over you on the script here, Denise, but
it's all good. I'm following.
There we go. The process of filmmaking beyond the blueprint is it's just as challenging as writing the screenplay, right? So today's guest is a prime example of how it can be done and done well. Denise, if you'll introduce us to our guest tonight.
Dana Cowden. I'm super excited because I want to see this movie so bad. So we're going to be talking about a film called Nova, and I can't wait. This is going to be a great interview. I'm so excited to talk to you, not only as a female in the industry, but also as a creative, and I think you have a very unique voice. So let's see. So Nova is... I lost my place. Okay. Nova is at various film festivals right now, and we know it's getting some attention. So first of all, welcome to the show.
Thanks. It's great to be here. I'm excited to be on the show.
Moving on to my first question. We're just going to shoot straight from the hip here. What's going on with Nova? Like, what's the latest news?
Well, we have, like you said, we've been in a festival run right now. So we are doing that whole thing, which takes a lot of time and energy, but we are also in talks with several distribution companies. We've been fortunate enough to have several distribution companies want Nova very badly. So we are...
That's awesome.
Yeah, we're in the very unbelievably blessed spot of getting to pick and choose which one of these is the best fit for Nova.
And then how are you doing that? Like, do you have like a set of I wouldn't say goals, but do you have like a set of like just rules that you're positioning in it, or is it just like a gut feeling, or how are you attacking it?
I wouldn't say rules. I would say what we're weighing more is since it's a genre film, it's science fiction. We were looking for somebody that can really represent that well. And, a lot of these, there's not a lot of independent feature films that are science fiction. So there's a lot of horror, there's a lot of drama, there's a lot of other films like that out there, but there's just really not a ton of science fiction in the independent film world. So one of the things is we wanted to make sure we could find a distribution company that could really market it well, because it's nothing if it doesn't find its audience. So it's all about trying to pick the best distribution company that we think can help Nova find its audience.
Absolutely.
Rock on.
Yeah.
We know you as a graduate of the National University Screenwriting MFA program. We're both Denise and I are graduates of it as well as you. But tell us a little bit more about your background and how you came to write Nova.
Well, I started out in the professional world as a surgical nurse and did that for many, many, many years. And then I just got to a point where I had had enough of it. I was finished. I had done as much as I could in that field, and I really thought I wanted to go into playwriting. And so I actually started into a program, a master's program for playwriting, and ended up taking a couple of classes for film as electives and just fell in love. Actually put two of the classes together and made my very first short film that I wrote and directed. So I just knew that was the way forward for me. And so then I found the MFA in screenwriting program and went from there. I've been writing, I guess, screenplays now for close to 10 years.
Wow.
So it's been a little while I've been at it. I had already written my first one a full-length feature before I joined into the master's program. And I've just been working and working ever since on screenplays. And I came to a point where I thought I wanted to try and direct some more short films because I had really enjoyed doing that. And so I wrote several short films and directed them and got them up and going and into festivals and that kind of thing. And then I said, I really want to do a feature. And I had this screenplay for Nova that I had been working on for over a year, just writing and rewriting and writing and rewriting. And I thought this would be a really great one because it's kind of a contained story, so I can control the filming of it, I think, much easier than, we weren't going to have to go out on the streets and try to film outside or go to the city and film or anything like that. We could do it all more in a contained environment. And so I thought that would be perfect for my first feature. So we launched into it.
And how did you come up with the idea of Nova? And if you could just tell people who aren't familiar with it what it's about, and we can jump in from there.
Well, I'll give you kind of the log line. It's a science fiction feature film, obviously, and the log line is on a mission to set up a robot colony on Mars. Android officer Nova is caught between her human crewmates and her own kind when a mutiny erupts during the flight. So that's the log line for it. And it's really the story about an android. And I first started working on this because I'm just fascinated with the whole, artificial intelligence field. And I couldn't help but wonder, when it happens in real form and we have androids that actually are AI, what are we going to do? I mean, how are we going to handle that as a society? Are we going to make, a lot of the same mistakes we've made already as human beings, or are we going to do something different? And so as I thought through those things, and all the great Philip K. Dick and all the great sci-fi writers have, broached all these subjects over and over again. And it's just always fascinated me. So I started working on that off that idea. And then I came up with the thought of this boy genius who built an android as a child, and the government acquired him and had him start building robots. And he's the one that came up with these androids and built them. And so originally, when I wrote the first draft, he was the main character. And then after a few drafts, it just became obvious to me that the real main character was Nova, the android. She was the one who was really experiencing real change and dealing with all of the issues. And so it just ended up flowing into her story. And that's when it really came together. and I found, a really clear storyline for her. And so that's how it came about.
From your first draft, like the end of your first draft, to you saying, like, you know what? I think this is ready to go. What was that time period like?
At least 10 months.
Wow, that's super quick. I'm so jealous that you
Well,
could write
Yeah.
that quick.
But no, that was from the end of the first draft. So it probably took me about 3 months to write that first draft. And then between that first draft and the one that we went with for the shooting draft, I would say there probably were at least 30 drafts. And
Wow.
maybe 20% of what was in the first draft made it all the way to the end.
Yeah.
Wow.
Mainly the
Yeah.
characters and a little bit of the plot, but the rest ended up evolving over the drafts.
Well, there
Do
you go.
you have like your crew of people that you just bounce ideas off of, or like is it all yourself? Are you making these revisions?
The writing process for me is I ascribe to Stephen King's school of write the first draft as fast as you can
Yeah.
through with the door closed, and then open the door to rewrite.
Yeah.
And
Yeah.
so that's really what I do. I kind of close myself up, even like husband complains because he's like, "Where are you?" Um, because I literally feel like I have to be immersed in the story and in the world. That's where it comes to me, and I'm always afraid of losing it, and that muse flying away to somebody else if I don't get on it, and stay on it. So I work really hard, and I seclude myself a lot to get the very first draft done. And then after that, I go back over it several times, um, seeing what I can see from it.
Mm-hmm.
And then usually I have to put that draft away for several weeks
Yep.
and work on a completely different screenplay, because I just have to get my mind completely clear of it. And then I can come back to it and look at it again with fresh eyes. And then usually I'll go over it some more. Sometimes I'll take it to a writer's group and we'll do a table read of it, or usually always my husband's my first reader, so he'll read it and tell me, you know, um, what he thinks. And, I pester him to death. Well, what about this character? What do you think? Did you like her? Did you hate her? Well, I do that whole thing to him and drive him crazy. um, and then usually after that, I'll rewrite some more and more and get more drafts and find my way a little more with it. And then usually I have to put it away again for a little while, because I think when you stay in it, I found for me that what happens after I've been in a screenplay for a while working on it, I especially if I've done several drafts, I lose track somewhere of what I have and haven't actually put in the writing, but it's still in my head. So, I maybe in the first draft I told you that Johnny's mother was a heroin addict, but by the time I get to the 10th draft, I've taken that whole scene out. So now it's not in there anywhere, but in my head I still remember it. So then when I put it away and I come back and read it, I go, "Oh wait, I didn't explain anything about
Right.
this. I need to put something back in
Yeah.
to explain
Yeah.
that little piece."
Yeah, I'm absolutely the same way. I am fully immersive in that first draft. Headphones on, like very little lighting except for my keyboard, and doors closed, the whole shebang. And it's just me and my computer, and I have to get all of that information out right away, or else I feel like I'm going to lose it and not remember it. And I'll do the same thing, especially because I travel for a living. I carry a recorder around with me. And if it's something like I just have to get out, I have been known to like go into the bathroom and just speak it out. And then then it's there and then I have it and I can go back to it. But yeah, I 100% understand. Just you have to get it out.
Oh,
Um,
absolutely. I'm the same
yeah,
way. I voice memos, that app on iPhones is my best
yeah,
friend, but then I have to worry about transcribing later. So I'm more just like get the ideas there, but it's like I have to be that immersive when I'm in an outline mode. And then when I get to the page, like in Final Draft or whatever format software we want to use, I literally have to be like glued to the moment, imagining it and live, as if I'm seeing the movie right then to be able to do it. But Dana, what you're talking about is a whole other thing that's kind of supporting everything we've been taught. Like, get some distance because you need
hmm
that to be able to rewrite where the work is really done.
Yeah, absolutely. Absolutely. And I do the same thing with my phone. I just whip out the notes on it. If I'm somewhere and I don't have my notebook with me, which I heavily invest in spiral notebooks. Like whenever they go
hmm
on sale for
hmm
school and they're like 10 cents
Yep.
a piece, I buy like 20 of them.
Yep.
And I carry one of those everywhere I go with
Everywhere.
me. And
Yep.
I have a whole box full of tons of them where I've jotted all kinds of things down. But um, like you, Denise, I feel like I have to if I get the idea, I've got to get it onto
Yeah.
something before it leaves me. Because even
Yeah.
if I just jot down a few words, when I go back and reread it, it'll bring that memory back up to me and I can
Yeah.
remember what I wanted to get down.
And see, this is why I want like to try out dictating to computer,
hmm
especially for like, and not just notes, because we all know that can happen now. The technology is there, but apparently, a lot of screenwriting software can do that. Because I feel like my mind is moving faster than my hand if I'm handwriting
hmm
something, right? So I'm like, I got to get it out faster than my hand can have the ability to write or type. Even, I type faster than I handwrite. So I'm like, oh, hurry, get it out. It's like I wish I could just, I could just jack in and just dump that idea literally.
Yes. Matrix style.
Yeah,
Like if that if we could combine the worlds of Matrix and Dreamscape, my world would be solved.
I'd see. I'm slightly frightened at the results, of the Matrix. Although it's just it's funny, Dana. We get along so well because of science fiction and movies like Total Recall, where it's an existential morality play, or like with Nova. What I loved about it was this great complexity of it's not that simple about whose side are you on and which side is right. That was the greatest like takeaway from that after talking with you about the script in the movie is that it's not that simple, especially when you're talking about artificial intelligence. So it's deeper than I think anyone is going to really recognize unless they're really thinking about it. It does have a think piece component to it.
Yeah, and surprisingly, it apparently that has been coming across. Like the distributors I've been talking to have mentioned that and have we've had discussions about, the characters and the storyline and those deeper ideas underneath. So I've been pleasantly surprised at how well it's been received.
A lot of screenwriters only know writing like the script, and I think it used to be called master scene format. I don't know if it still is, but when we talk about first drafts, it's that first one, and we're told no camera directions or anything else like that, because this is it's for the purpose of selling the script, but or at least selling your ability to write. But this is different because you were writing this. I mean, when you were writing Nova, did you know you were going to direct it? Was that the whole goal of it? I mean, you mentioned earlier how you'd already been working on it, but how did you come by the decision to make the film yourself, and how did you approach getting the script ready to make into a film?
Well, I wrote it before I decided to film it. But I had in my mind when I wrote it that I wanted to write a film that was somewhat contained because in the past, I'd written all these great, big, epic, wonderful screenplays that I love, but nobody's going to make a screenplay that's going to cost $100 million from a writer who hasn't written anything that they know of.
Right.
So I knew I wanted to write something that would be smaller. And originally I was hoping that I could sell it to someone that would want to make it. Um, so that was the first idea behind it. But I guess I kind of write with a director's eye anyway. I very much direct the camera in my writing, though I don't say like the camera looks down from, whatever.
Right.
I write in a way that your mind's eye is following like a camera. At least that's how I feel like I'm doing it. So even when I was getting the script ready for us and doing, the shot list and all of that for making it, I didn't change any of that. I didn't put any camera direction in at all. It's the same as it was before I was going to direct it, because I think you're going to accomplish the same thing if you say, you know, um, the sparkling golden pebble peeked out from under the bed, then you're directing the camera down under the bed, looking at a sparkling little pebble,
Right.
So it's the same thing, or if you write that, her eyes sweep across the room and land on the watch, that's a camera direction. You're just not saying it's a camera direction.
You're not saying dolly, tilt, or pan, or any of that jazz. You're not saying medium shot or like cut to, that sort of thing. Although cut to can be used here and there, but
right. So I just left it that way. And when I worked with my director of photography and we came up with a shot list, we just pretty much came up with what was written in the script, and then he had some ideas for things he wanted to do, which were brilliant. And then some more of it obviously changed on set. When something wonderful was happening, we were like, yeah, let's get that, So
right.
it happens, it changes and evolves as it goes through each rendition.
So you didn't actually have like a final script until after you were done?
I don't think anybody does. I think whenever you finish a film, then you have to go back and put in what was actually the shooting script, because there's always little surprises that you find. Like, even if it's just like a one scene where we had two characters kind of snuggling together on the bed, it was so beautiful and heartbreaking that my DP just started pulling the camera back and up away. Mm-hmm. And it was gorgeous. And so I'm like, oh my God, do that again. Let's do it a little slower and a little more. And that's what ended up in the film, although it wasn't written like that, because, we didn't see that moment until we were actually there. And then it was just this beautiful, haunting, sweet framing that was perfect.
That's right. Amazing.
As a screenwriter, it's literally just the blueprint is that one line. It's like, she invites her in and pulls the blanket over. That's not how it was in your script, of course, but it's literally all of a sentence, the fewest words possible. And if you set it up, that moment's already in and of itself heartbreaking and sweet. And then everything else that you add to it you're adding muscle to the bone there, right?
Yeah, that's why, filmmaking is such a collaborative art, because everyone adds their own art to it. Our sound guy, Miles, who was brilliant, added his own art to it. He added in, let me get over here and get this sound, or I want to get these steps because this is important, or whatever, and we can't, you can't have her do that because then we can't hear this over here. His art added to it. The actors add, obviously tremendously to the art form, and they can pick up different cues and feel things a little differently. And you see them on the screen and you're like, oh my gosh, we got to go with that. Everybody adds their own art to it, from the person who's painted the set to, the director and everybody in between.
Did you have, you had a vision with your words, but did you have like a visual vision of what you wanted it to look like?
I always do. I see it. I guess like Chris, I see it in my mind like
Mm-hmm.
it's playing like a movie.
Yeah.
So I just pretty much pull it from what's coming out of my mind.
No, that's perfect. It's perfect. I have so many questions. So, next question for me would be, you decided you were going to make this movie. What was your process as far as like the practical side of it? Like, this is the budget that I'm going to set up. How did you find the people that you were going to work with? And how did you set up the more practical side of shooting this?
Yeah, that's the harder part.
Yeah.
Right?
Yeah.
Well, it's all hard. I mean, coming up with a script is hard. Then it's all hard. It's all has its own challenges. But most of the team, a lot of the core team I have worked with in other projects. So my DP, who I've worked with on several short films, Aaron Castillo, is just fantastic. And I met him when I was working as costume designer on another set of a feature film. And so he and I worked together on a short film that I wrote, and we just fit perfectly. I loved his art. He liked mine, and working with me, and we worked well together. So we're a great team. The same thing with some of my producers that I've had on, my hair and makeup folks. Actually, my hair and makeup folks are my daughters.
That's great. That's
yeah, I mean, you use what you have, right?
Yeah.
In independent filmmaking, you use literally what you have. And I have one daughter who owns a hair salon, and she's a stylist. And my other daughter at the time was doing makeup, wedding makeup and all kinds of makeup. She does special effects makeup too. So, I was like, we can do something really cool with the hair and the makeup for this film. And we did. And they both worked with me for the whole thing. But mainly the team that I have, most of them I have worked with before. Donna Capel has been one of my producers that I've worked with on just about every one I've done, except maybe the first short film or two I did. I met her. She was doing craft services, and I was a PA the first time when I met her years ago. And she read one of my first short film scripts, and she just loved it. And from then on, she's been like my biggest supporter and a fantastic help to getting all these films done, for sure. So the team has kind of evolved as I made other films, and I try really, really, really hard when I'm on set to be extremely organized and extremely prepared, because independent filmmaking is hard, and nobody's getting rich on it. We're all trying to do this thing we love, and many people are working either for free or for very much less than what they really should be making. And so I feel like if I'm going to have them do that for me, then I owe them for me to be completely prepared as possible and as efficient, and work as hard as I possibly can to do what I can to make it easier for them and feed them well.
I have more of a topical question. You filmed this recently, so how did you deal with the pandemic and those sort of issues? Was that a challenge or a different kind of challenge? Because you have a medical background, so I'm sure that helped.
Yeah, it was before, I think we went into like the gigantic lockdown phase. And so it was kind of at the beginning of it. And so we had a COVID protocol. Everybody had to go get tested and bring their results. Everybody had to wear masks unless you were on camera. Everybody had to have their temperature taken every day.
Mm-hmm.
It was back then when we were doing temperatures.
Temperature checks, right?
Yeah.
Right.
But everybody knew, to the credit of this fantastic cast and crew that I had, everybody knew that if somebody got COVID and we got shut down and had to wait for 2 weeks, we would not get to finish this film. Because we didn't have the space. We only had the space for a certain amount of time. And there's no way we could rebuild those sets and all of that stuff all over again. So everybody knew, everybody kind of stayed home. Even on our days off, they would stay at home and not go anywhere. They came to set like completely prepared and ready to go. And everybody was just on the ball 100%. And it shows. Every ounce of it is up on that screen.
That's amazing. And I think, like, just hearing you speak, I think that is a credit to you for creating such an embracing and atmosphere on set. I mean, that's pretty amazing that everybody was on the same page with one common goal. It's pretty amazing.
Right, because in general, it's hard enough to get anybody to align on a central vision as it is. And there are several other reasons I'm a bit biased about Nova, but the biggest of which we can talk about in a separate, later discussion in the podcast. But you also shot this, I think, a year ago. Like, you did this in 10 days in January, and here in Texas, where we don't have it any easier than anyone else as far as, the pandemic goes. But a local Texas person, making an independent science fiction movie, shooting it in 10 days, that's still just amazing. Just flat out amazing.
Yeah, it's kind of crazy now that I think back on it.
Right. Your adrenaline's kicking because you're directing the thing. And it's like, when you're going through it, you're just like, you're on some sort of like, you're on this vision quest, right? So your 10 days may have flown by and you got everything that you wanted, right? But did you have any?
Well, no, not everything.
Along the way?
Not everything we wanted. I mean, I could have happily spent another 20 days or so, but we had the wonderful opportunity of having a lot of pre-planning time. So we really, really, really planned. And then we built a lot of stuff into the set to make it easier. We knew how quick we had to do this. And so we built like practical lighting into the set that we knew we could use. Like in one scene, we have Abilene go over and lean against this wall we built lights into the wall. And so we had him go lean up against the lights. So, the lights on him, and we could just use the Steadicam or whatever and not have to, spend an hour or two setting up lights. So a lot of the lighting was built in practically. And then Aaron pre-lit a lot of other stuff because we built the set so that we had at least 3 sets up at a time. So that, like, we would film, like on day 1, we filmed scenes in the quarters, one of the quarters for the crew, and then we went out to the flight deck and filmed a couple of scenes out on the flight deck. And while we were filming the flight deck, they were turning over the quarters to the other person's room, doing a whole set dressing change, and then we could go back and film in there. So we did a lot of things to really move it along. And like I said, Aaron had already pre-lit like the flight deck. So when we got ready to go over there, there was very little that we had to do to get ready. We also had a rehearsal day that helped a lot. And I also really, I told the cast many times that we were filming so fast that they had to know their lines, and we really had to move. So they would not have a lot of opportunities for many takes of anything. So it was super important that they got what they wanted like in the first or second take, because they may not get anything else. And so they came to set, all of them, super prepared. I mean, they knew their lines inside and out, and they were ready to go.
That is so cool. And that's how you have to do it for independent film. You get no second chances. It's like just you got to get this in, get out, and get it done. It's very guerrilla style.
Yeah, absolutely.
And then I follow up. um, did you studied screenwriting and you did study filmmaking? How much of that has, now that you've made a full-length feature, how much of that has become just like commonplace, or how much are you still learning and growing and like, I'm going to do this different next time because I did it this way this time?
Oh my gosh, every single film I've made, from every single short film, I have learned a bunch of new stuff on each and every one. So every one of them, I've learned a little more and a little more and a little more, and every one I've tried to do a little more and a little more and a little more. So it's a constant learning curve. And I don't know if you ever, I guess if you're like a Spielberg or something, you know exactly what you want and how you want it and how it's going to work out. But then again, I think back to him and filming Jaws. I mean, what a roller coaster that was for him, right? So
right.
And so I think you just keep learning. You learn as you do as much as you possibly can to prepare. Like, I can't tell you how many books I read, how many audibles I listened to from directors, how I went on set. Like, I started as a PA, carrying a walkie-talkie around and picking up the trash, so I could be on set and see how it worked and what happened. And I learned not only from all the departments that were there that I worked from, but I watched the directors, I watched the DPs, all the directors I've worked with. I've learned so much from, and I've watched how they handled things. I'm like, I don't think I could, do it that well. And so I tried to learn from each and every one of them. And I think you just keep learning and evolving and adding more tools to your toolbox as you go along.
Yeah, 100%. So now that you've finished, well, you're not finished with this really, because you're still selling and getting it out there. But what are you working on now besides this project? I'm sure you have a million projects going on.
I do, as a matter of fact. We're already in pre-production for our next film. It's called the Orias Project, and it's a science fiction thriller. So it's a little darker, a little more ominous than Nova. But it is the next project that we're working on.
Cool.
And I also have a pilot for a limited series that I'm getting finished up on, and also another script that I'm working on that's actually a comedy, believe it or not. That was just an idea I had, and everybody loved it. And so I had an opportunity to get in this little writers group. It's a very small writers group, and I'm working on that script in that group. And so those are all kind of going on at the same time.
Yeah. It's juggling.
Well, you have to keep those irons in the fire because it gives you that fresh perspective, right? I mean, I remember reading about James Cameron when he was writing Aliens. He'd had set up 2 different desks because he was concurrently working on the screenplay for Rambo First Blood Part 2. So on the days when he wasn't writing Aliens, he'd switch to the other desk and write Rambo. So
yeah. And like I said, you need to switch back and forth to get some, to be able to see the forest for the trees sometimes. So it's good to have more than one thing going so you can do that.
Absolutely.
Here's a more of an existential question for you. You've had now this is your second career, that you're doing very well at both of them. What if you were to go back and do it all over again? Would you still go do medicine first, or would you just like focus on this, and why?
That's an interesting question. I actually went into nursing because I went into the Air Force, and the first opening they had when I got out of college was for a medical technician.
Mm.
And I wanted to go to, I knew I wanted to go to college and I couldn't afford to. So I knew if I
Right,
joined the military, they would pay for my college. And the first thing they had coming open was medical. So okay, I'll do it.
right, right.
So I went in as a med tech, and then as I got towards the end of my 4-year period, my service, I started looking at school and getting ready to go to school, and they were like, well, you already have this many credits towards nursing.
Mm.
So I'm like, okay. So I went into nursing, and I loved nursing and I loved working in surgery. It's one of those fields that's, very technical and
Mhm.
very still caregiving. So I loved it. And I loved being in the military. I went back in as a nurse and was a nurse in the military. And I loved being able to help soldiers and wartime help, local civilians and stuff. We treated everybody. So
Mhm.
I enjoyed it. I felt like I really was doing something that made a difference to other people. And so I love it. But I wouldn't say it was the career, of my heart. Like I didn't
Right,
go home and say, gosh, I can't wait to get into the operating room tomorrow.
right, right. No, I
Um,
100% get you. Yeah.
but I wake up and run in to grab a cup of coffee and sit down on the computer because I've got these great ideas that are flowing through my head and I want to hurry up and get them down. And,
Yeah.
and then I can be sitting there at noon when my husband comes in and goes, are you going to eat?
My wife does the same thing with me. She knows I get tunnel vision on this, and she'll knock on the door. It's like, honey, are you going to break away for dinner? And that's if I'm doing anything creative, right? So screenwriting or otherwise. Now, Dana, personal question, because my dad was in the Air Force. So were you stationed in San Antonio at any point?
When I was in the reserves, well, of course, I had to go to Lackland for basic training when I first went in, but I also was a reservist, in San Antonio
Okay,
at
because
BAMC.
my dad was growing up. He was stationed at Randolph, but we moved to Hawaii for 4 years, then came back, and then he was stationed at Kelly before retiring. So
Yeah.
just
Well,
another.
I think all of that helps the writing, right? So all of that, all
Mm,
your life experience, no matter one thing I found is, I mean, I worked in high school, I worked at a plant nursery. So what did I put in Nova? I put a
Plant.
plant nursery on the spaceship,
Yep.
right?
yep,
That
absolutely.
actually that actually leads to my next question. So the old adage is write what you know, and that's something Chris and I have discussed many times.
Hmm.
But in the world of sci-fi, my opinion, I like sci-fi that's based in some reality. Like the elements of the story or the character. There's got to be something that I relate to. Because if it's not relatable to me, then I'm just not interested.
Mm.
I'm selfish like that. But something that I'm really interested from the sci-fi writer aspect is, what is that something that you're cognitive of, or are you just like, creating this world and then hopefully it's relatable, or is that just not a goal?
Um, I was in I think it was a conference at a film festival one time, and I think they had Meg LaFave I'm not sure if I'm saying her name right at all, but she was one of the writers for Inside Out, Pixar's
Mm,
Inside Out.
yeah.
Yeah.
And so I guess somebody asked her if she was talking about write what you know.
Mhm.
And she kind of brought that up, like, right? She goes like, well, how, like, if you're writing like weird out science fiction or something, how do you write what you know? Or if you're writing,
Exactly.
8th
Exactly.
century, Roman, whatever, how do you write what you know? And she said, but what you write and what you know is you know how people feel. You know how it feels to be lonely. You know how it feels to be angry. You know all of those things you draw on. You do your research as much as you can, and then you draw on those things that you know or you know something about, and that's what enriches those. That's what brings it to life. And I was
Right.
like, oh
Because
my gosh, that's brilliant.
Yeah.
exactly, but because nobody, when you first start trying to write, people tell you, I almost don't like the phrase write what you know, because it's highly dismissive. There's so much in there. It's vague enough to where it's just one thing you can say and then move on, but there's so much that you can unpack in there. And in the case of Nova, the great thing about it is what's so enriching about it is the characters and their emotions they're feeling, especially the fact that we're talking about artificial intelligence feeling for the first time and fumbling through that, where as normal humans we have that the benefit of having guidance as children, or at least we hope, enough of the guidance to, navigate through that. And an AI robot of any kind has to suddenly, get through this in the most constrained of situations or timing. And so, well, that's one of the benefits of Nova, is that you really went into that with the idea of like the title character, what she's having to manage in the most complex of circumstances.
Right, but even bringing that down to writing what you know, I mean, who doesn't know what it feels like to feel like you don't fit in, right?
Mhm.
Yes.
Mhm.
I think we've all been in a situation at least once in our lifetime. Some of us, many, like if we're military brats and we moved around a lot, or we're in the military, moved around a lot, it's always trying to fit in, right?
Mm-hmm.
So
Yeah.
I think that's a completely relatable feeling of not feeling like you fit in. So having Nova be an android that's having feelings, she doesn't fit, she's not a human, but she's not, not completely a machine either. So where does she fit in that continuum? That I know what that feels like, to feel like you don't fit in. So I I can't say I gave that to her. She came out with that, because I'll start writing characters and I will start from what I think I know about a character, and then at some point the characters take over and they do the story, and I don't feel like I'm really trying to make anything happen anymore. It's who their personality is, and that it comes out. So I guess she was telling me how she felt.
So many screenwriters say that exact same thing. How and when does that happen? What is that moment where that pivot takes place?
I think it's part of that immersion in the world of the characters, and really um, keeping them in your mind and in your head, and feeling, trying to feel what they would feel. And then at some point, you're writing that line, he yells at her, what does she do? And you're thinking in your head, what does she do? And then at some point, all of a sudden, you're writing the line and he yells at her and she picks up the glass and throws it at him. And you didn't think it, just, naturally that's what she did, because she's hot tempered and she doesn't, think about what she's doing. She just grabs it and goes.
Mm.
So I think it just, I don't know if there's a certain point that it happens. I don't, I think, I think it happens more after I get the first draft out, because I feel like the first draft is where I find out who they all really are and what they want the story to be about, right?
Right. You have to go through that experience to discover them, almost like you're meeting new people for the first time and you're not going to learn everything.
Right.
completely until you've gotten to know them on a much more recurrent kind of experience.
But that's my process. Some people write, big backgrounds for characters and, go through entire complex, socioeconomic, birth, family, everything, all of that. And I've tried doing that. For me, it just doesn't work. It doesn't get me any faster to that point.
Mhm.
So at this now when I write, I have a basic idea in my mind of who the character is and some basic characteristics. Like usually it's somebody I know or some part of me that 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 I feel I can identify with. And then that character will eventually come out completely and take over. And then by the end of the draft, I can tell you all that stuff about them.
Right. Well, because then they're almost like your best friend.
Exactly.
Yeah.
But you know, or at least you know them enough because
You know them enough. Yeah.
Because what if you're writing a serial killer and all of a sudden, okay, it's
Sure.
like,
Go that way. Sure. I was trying to make it nice and.
no, I mean she's writing science fiction. So.
I did write one screenplay that had a lot of that dark stuff in it, and I did not like it. It was hard for me. Because I really it was for me it was very difficult because it was like putting away the rest of the characters is hard to put those away as well. So even on my characters I write that are bad characters or evil characters, they still linger with me and I still hold on to some of that. But whenever I can't, like, I couldn't write a Hannibal Lecter. I would have nightmares every night and never be able to sleep again. So
it makes you want to, like, if Ted Talley or Thomas Harris were in the room, it's like, how did you like dissociate yourself with that experience after writing the darkest? I mean, even I'm sure Stephen King has mentioned that in his book on writing about how to separate that. But man, that's just, maybe we shouldn't go down that rabbit hole of morbidity there and switch it to something more positive since we're kind of close on time here. But okay, here's the $1 billion question. And some of you spoke to at the top of the podcast, but when can the public find and watch Nova? Because I really want them to see what you did.
It should be out on platforms this summer. So
Yay!
This summer, look for it. We have a Facebook page right now that's up for Nova. Nova Feature Film, I think, is the Facebook page, and you can watch the trailer. The trailer is also I think it's on YouTube and Vimeo, and it's also on my IMDb page for Nova, so you can watch it on there too, I think. So yeah, the trailer's out there, and this summer the film should be out there for everybody to watch.
That's awesome.
That's so cool. And I have to do a bit of shameless self-plugging. When Dana was talking about, the team that she's grown on this, I was sort of a latecomer because I had the unique and special privilege of composing the music score for Nova.
And you did a fantastic job. Actually, you did the score for one of my short films that was amazing, and we worked so great together on that. And you just had the most awesome piece of music that got us kicked off for Nova, that really kicked off the whole soundtrack for it.
It did. And honestly, to relate it back to screenwriting, we could have a longer director-composer relationship discussion for another podcast entirely separate of this one. We really wanted to focus on screenwriting here, but you also want to be the kind of person on a project where people can rely on you, whether you're a writer, a DP, because you were talking already about how you've worked with some of these people multiple times before because you've developed some trust with them. And I say all that to lead up to this story. The reason that we had that piece of music that kicked off the whole thing is I after working with Dana on the short film, and having that experience, I get an email in November of 2020, and it literally read on the regarding line, "Help!" It may not have sounded like that in her head, but it sounded like that in mine. and she said she needed a piece of music for a ballet piece. And I had this one other thing literally just lying around. I'd written it as an audition piece for somewhere else. And I said, well, and I was expecting a lot of notes back and a lot of changes because that's the screenwriter in me. Even as a composer, you still think about, okay, they're going to come back with feedback. This doesn't work. This doesn't work. That sort of thing. And, you know, not a frame of film has been shot yet, to be honest, at this point. But still, you expect some notes like, well, could you make this change, that change? And I was fully expecting it. And God bless Dana. She came back like, this is perfect. We're going with it. And I'm like, really? I was sitting there going, that's it? First draft? Total luck.
It was perfect. And launched the whole film soundtrack. So that was perfect.
Yeah, everything was built out of that. But it comes back to what were the emotions of the movie. You know, it really came back to, did we have something there that audiences could relate to universally? Since music is a universal language, it really has to do. It's like with screenwriting where you do have to, you know, dialogue has to do all these different things. You know, you have, you know, it has to cover so much ground, and so does music when you're in the post-production side of things. It has to accentuate, it has to follow the director's vision, it has to establish an identity for the movie. It also, and this was the biggest lesson I learned from scoring an entire feature by myself for the first time. And one of the greatest lessons I learned from Dana is that you can't write music that takes away from the dialogue, which is especially true for a writer director, because you don't really want to take away from all this, you know, important stuff that she wrote down that the actors are having to say and have put their heart and soul into it. And you want to cover it up with music. You can't do that. She didn't say that, but that's just the lesson I took away from it. And I really, really had such a great experience from a lessons point of view, that same way with it.
Yeah, but we let you like go crazy with it in other places. That's what I told you. There are places that your music gets to showcase, and we're going to put those in. So,
and nobody gets that normally. I'm just luck of the draw completely. I don't know what's going to happen to us on the next one, but
I'm sure it'll be the same.
It could be, you know, and I'm looking forward to that, just to see how that's going to turn out.
Me too.
Cool. All right. I think we're at time, and I know, Dana, you're very busy getting your next project up and running. So thank you so much for all your insight and your wisdom of, you know, going from writing to directing to, you know, really going the round trip of delivering and executing on what you wrote. Thank you so much for talking to us today.
It was my great pleasure to get to chat with you guys. It was fantastic.
Thank you so much.
We're all super excited, and we're going to keep everybody posted on what's happening with Nova and all of your projects. We'll include all the links and everything in this broadcast, so everyone can go check it out.
Absolutely.
Fantastic. Thank you.
Thank you. And you're welcome for, you know, so much gratitude, reciprocal gratitude going around here. Denise, save me from myself and tell our listeners where they can find us and more about us.
All right. So as always, we are growing every week. We have more followers. So thank you very much to everyone who's new and following us. You can find Telling the Show on LinkedIn, Facebook, Twitter, Instagram, or the good old fashioned email, which is tellingtheshow@gmail.com. We actually read the email ourselves. We don't have any, you know, spiffy looking interns or anything like that. So if you do write,
in my case, I have no flunkies. So,
if you write to us, will absolutely read it.
Cool. And we got some great interviews coming up this year in this season. We're a lot of great, talented people like Dana. And so reach out and we want to hear from you, what you love, what you don't like. I'm hoping that you really like us more than you don't like us, but let us know things. Send us log lines and send us your ideas if you want to have us parse something out on one of our podcasts, anything you want to do, because we all learn and grow together. You know, I certainly learned a lot from Dana, and I'm hoping, and with every one of our guests, we learn so much. I learn from Denise all the time. So speaking of Denise, do you have any departing words of wisdom?
I do. It's actually something my dad sent me last week. Walls turned sideways are bridges. And it's a quote by Angela Davis. And I think that actually speaks to what we were talking about earlier, where, if something's not going the way you wish it, maybe you have to adjust your goal to get it and achieve it.
Absolutely. Course corrections. And at the top of a year, that's definitely food for thought for everybody.
Yeah. Absolutely.
All right. Thanks for listening, everybody. We'll see you next time on Telling the Show.